If there is a man whom the chess world never quite really understood, then it is Bobby Fischer. In the late 90s, someone was haunting the internet chess club, a player with no name, no profile worth noting, logging on quietly and dismantling some of the strongest minds in the game. This remained rumors, however, until Nigel Short, a man who reached the World Championship final in 1993 against Kasparov, revealed that he had indeed played against this mystery player, of whom he became increasingly convinced was Bobby Fischer. The evidence he pointed to most directly was their very first meeting, an 8-game session that ended 0-8, with Short losing every single game. That is the context for the game we're about to look at today. Game 6 of that same session. Short played as black, while Fischer played with the white pieces. Fischer opens with pawn to f4, already outside normal territory. This is the bird's opening. Short responds pawn to d5, a sensible and principled reply, staking a claim in the center immediately. And here, on move 2, Fischer plays the most ridiculous move I have ever seen. He moves his king to f2. On its face, this is absurd. Moving your king in the opening is everything chess teaches you not to do, since your king is a liability in the opening. But that's precisely the point. It seems Fischer isn't trying to play good chess in the conventional sense here. He is trying to play chess that exists in no database, no theory book, no preparation file. And this is really peculiar of him because he really wasn't a fan of opening theories. He preferred more spontaneous games. Knight to c6, developing naturally, and Fischer continues with king to f3. Now it just looks ludicrous, and this is massive disrespect right there. And yet Fischer must have played it straight-faced because there was no hesitation, no hedging. While the game continues and we see pawn to e5. Fischer follows a quiet, deliberate sequence. Pawn to c3, which invites Short to push e4 and grab space, but Short declines with knight to f6, keeping things stable. Then d3, giving white a solid pawn structure, bishop to e7 from Short, then g3 from Fischer, preparing a kingside fianchetto even though the king is obviously never castling normally after f2 and f3. Short castles, getting his own king to safety. Fischer plays king to g2, walking his king to the corner, almost like a reverse castle, tucking it away on g2 the way most players would tuck it away on g1. At this point, Short is objectively better. His king is safe, his structure is sound, White's king has been wandering through the opening like it owns the place, and the position should be favoring black. But Fischer has also successfully done what he came here to do. The game bears no resemblance to anything Short prepared. There is no theory left. There is only chess. Short pushes pawn to e4, then Fischer responds with d4, closing the center and signaling that the fight is going to happen on the wings rather than down the middle. Short comes up with the clever idea of pawn to h5, eyeing a future h4 push that would tear open the pawn structure in front of Fischer's wandering king. The knight on f6 eyes g4, bishop to e6 adds pressure, and gradually Short builds what looks like a serious kingside assault. Fischer keeps developing. Pawn to e3, g6, h3 from Fischer, a prophylactic move preventing Short's h4 push for now. King to g7 from Short, then c4, and rook to g8, followed by c5 from Fischer, locking down the queenside completely. Now Short commits fully to the kingside plan. Rook to h8, loading up for the h4 push that he's been preparing since move 11. White develops with knight to c3, Short plays bishop to e6, then comes a3, queen to d7, bishop to b5, rook back to g8, b4, and king to f8. Both sides are maneuvering, both rooks are lined up for Short's coming pawn storm. After bishop to a4, Short finally plays it, pawn to g5, launching the attack. Fischer captures on g5, f takes g5, and Short takes back with the rook. White pushes b5, attacking the knight on c6, which retreats to d8. Fischer is now preparing his own pawn break. The idea of pawn to b6 is in the air. But first, he plays knight g to e2, protecting the pawn on g3 that Short had been eyeing.
Short doubles rooks on the g file with rook to g8, piling pressure on the structure. Then Fischer plays pawn to b6. This is the kind of move that blitz players miss. It doesn't look like it fits. The game has been about the king side for the last 15 moves. Short's rooks are on g8. His plan is h4. His whole position is pointed at Fischer's king. And Fischer just ignores all of it and advances on the other side of the board entirely. Pawn to b6, cracking open the queen side, going after the queen's position directly. Short responds with c6. Fischer captures on a7. A dangerous passed pawn now sits on a7, threatening to become a queen if Short isn't careful. Short has to respond with queen to c8 to stop it. Fischer plays bishop to b3, and now queen to a8 from Short, covering the promotion square. Rook to b1 from Fischer, and Short plays what he'd always planned. Queen takes on a7, picking up the pawn. Rook to f1 from Fischer, queen back to a8, queen to e1 from Fischer, queen to c8 from Short, and now Short's queen eyes the pawn on h3. Defending h3 looks difficult. Fischer finds it anyway. Knight to f4. This defends h3, but also creates an invitation. Short can now sacrifice 2 rooks for Fischer's queen and a pawn, and Short takes the offer. Rook takes g3, queen takes g3, rook takes g3, king takes back. The board has completely transformed. The position is now a complicated material imbalance, 2 rooks versus queen territory, and both players navigate it carefully. Bishop to f5 from Short, bishop to d1 from Fischer, knight to e6. Fischer captures on h5, and after a series of trades, the position simplifies into something that looks equal, but isn't.
Black replies with knight to g7, attacking the bishop, which retreats back to g4. After taking, we see h takes on g4, and black plays queen to c7. Now white must respond with king to g2, stepping away from the danger. Black continues with knight to e6. White goes bishop d2, and now a very good idea by black going knight to g5. And after bishop to e1, black plants his knight on f3.
Fischer plays rook to h1, setting up the idea of rook to h8 infiltration. Short tries queen to d7, targeting g4, but Fischer defends with king to g3. Short plays bishop to d8. After knight to e2, Short checks with bishop to c7, but Fischer blocks with knight to f4, and the game continues with queen to e7 from Short. Fischer plays bishop to c3, preventing Short from playing knight takes d4, which would allow the pawn to roll to e3 and potentially e2, becoming dangerous. Short trades with bishop takes f4, and after pawn takes back, plays king to g7. Now Fischer shifts the game decisively to the queen side with pawn to a4, queen to c7 from Short. Fischer plays rook to b6, a brilliant restricting move that cuts off the queen from infiltrating down the Short diagonal. And here, Short makes the decisive mistake, pawn to f6. It opens the 7th rank, and Fischer immediately sees it. Rook h to b1. Short plays king to g6, not wanting his queen pinned against his king, but Fischer takes on b7 anyway, winning the queen by force because Short can't escape the pressure from both rooks bearing down on the 7th rank. Short tries queen to d8, but the position is already resigned to its fate. Fischer has a forced mate in 5. Pawn to f5 check, king must go to g5, rook to g7, the only move is king to h6, rook to g6 again, staying on the g-file, king to h7, and rook to h1. Short resigned, not on the checkmate itself, but on seeing it coming from 3 moves away. Because that's the thing about playing Fischer. By the time you see the end, the game was already over several moves ago. If you enjoyed this analysis, please like this video and subscribe to keep seeing more from this channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.